Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. So for this week we are going to look at understanding comparison in sentences. So let's get started. In this slide you will see two types of comparisons, which are the first one comparative and the second one superlative. So for comparative, we can use comparative form to compare two people, ideas or things. And for superlative form, you can use superlative form to compare three or more people, ideas or things. And normally you can spot the word the in front of the adjective. Let's move on to the next slide. So for comparative, it shows comparison between things. So on your screen, you see two apples. One is big, another one is bigger. Let's say, if you say your apple is big, but mine is bigger, it shows comparison between the two apples. So you know that your apple is bigger than your friend. So as mentioned before, comparative form is used to compare two people, ideas or things. Right? So let's move on to the next slide for more information about comparative form. In order to form comparative sentences, you will see here comparative adjective and comparative adverbs. So for comparative adjective, they are used to compare differences between the two objects they modify. For example, if you have the adjective of small, then it will be smaller for comparative adjective. If you have happy, then it becomes happier, right? So for comparative adverb, we use comparative adverbs if you want to compare one verb action with another. So for example, here you have the adverb of high, then it becomes higher for comparative adverb. The same goes for carefully, then you will change it to more carefully, right? Here, the differences between comparative adjective and comparative adverbs so that you are not going to get confused of these two comparative sentences. For example, if your adjective is fast, for example here I have a fast car, but then for comparative adjective sentence, you are going to have a faster car, right? If you have fast as an adverb, for example, in the sentence of he drive fast, then when you want to change it into comparative adverb sentence, the sentence becomes he drives faster. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. So as mentioned before, you know that comparative adjective is used when we talk or when we want to compare about two things. And you need to remember that the comparative adjective is normally followed by the word then. For example, in this sentence, you can see John is 1 meter 80 centimeter. He is tall, but Chris is 1 meter 85 centimeter. So we can say he is taller than John. So you have taller as comparative adjective and you have the word than. Right? So regarding the structure, you need to know that in order to write comparative adjective sentence, you need to follow this structure. So you will have noun, which is your object. You have the verb. You have comparative adjective. Then you have the word then, followed by another noun, which is normally the object. For example, you have here, mango is sweeter than lychee. So your sweeter is comparative adjective. Then you have the word then that shows a comparison between the sweetness of mango and lychee. Right, so this slide is about forming comparative adjective. So in order to change your adjective, you need to know that it depends on the number of the adjective syllable. For example, if you have one syllable adjective, right? Example, tall, then the adjective will be added with er when you want to form it as comparative adjective. So from tall, it becomes taller. So you have he is taller than Robin, right? So if you have two syllables adjective which ends with y, so the adjective, the y, you need to change to I plus er. So for example, you have happy, then it becomes happier. So the sentence is the girl is happier than her sister. If you have two syllables which do not end with y, in this case you have famous. So the form is you need to have more plus the adjective, right? In this case, famous change to more famous. So you say he is more famous than our previous boss. Then if you have three or more syllables, the same rules applies here. So you have more and adjective as well. For example, you have beautiful. Beautiful has three syllables, so you change to more beautiful. Here you have Snow White is more beautiful than Rapunzel. Right, the next one is regarding the irregular forms of adjective. So this one will be discussed later. So now we talk about superlative. You know that we use superlative when we want to compare three or more people, ideas or things, alright? Or if we want to compare in groups. So for example, you see in the picture, I have a baby is tall, but then her sister is taller than her, right? So it shows comparative. But then if I add one more sentence, another girl is the tallest one. So the tallest here shows the superlative sentence. So you need to know superlative adjective. We use it in sentences where a subject is compared to a group of objects. So we can say here superlative adjective are used to describe an object which is at the upper or lower limit of a quality, right? So here regarding the structure, it will be a little bit different from comparative adjective. So superlative adjective has noun, which is the subject. You have the verb, you have the, you have your superlative adjective, and you have noun, which is the object. You can see from the sentences here, right? So the first one you have, this is the smallest box I have ever seen. So you have the smallest. The smallest shows the superlative adjective sentence. You have, my house is the largest one in our neighborhood. So you know, right, in your neighborhood you have 10 houses, but then your house is the largest one. Right? The third sentence, your dog ran the fastest of any dog in the race. And the last one we have, we all threw our rocks at the same time, but then my rock flew the highest. Right? So here we talk about how to form superlative adjective. So similar with comparative adjective, superlative adjective have its own rule, right? So if you have one syllable adjective, you need to have the plus the adjective plus est. For example, you have large becomes largest, right? You have my house is the largest one in our neighborhood. And if you have two syllables adjective, so you have the form of the plus adjective, you remove y, added with iest, from happy become happiest. So you have she is the happiest among all. The same with these two syllables which do not end with y, right? You have the form of the plus most plus adjective. So you have the adjective quiet, it becomes the most quiet, right? And for three or more syllables, you have the plus most plus adjective as well. For example, you have wonderful, then you change to the most wonderful. So you say, the lady is the most wonderful woman on earth, right? So superlative adjective also have irregular adjective. So this will be discussed next. So here we talk about irregular comparative and superlative adjective. Right, so you need to know that there are a handful of irregular adjectives that don't follow the rules that I mentioned before in comparative adjective. If you see here, if you have adjective good, the comparative is better, right? So if you still remember, the rules before is you add with er. So here, good doesn't become gooder, but then it becomes better. So that's why it is called as irregular, right? You have few more examples. You have bad, so comparative adjective for bad is worse, and you have little, comparative adjective for little is less. For example, you can see in the sentences. So here the first one, I did better than the rest of my class on the final. You cannot say, I did gooder than the rest of my class on the final. It is wrong, right? So you need to remember, irregular adjective for comparative has different forms. The same goes to superlative adjective, which are irregular, right? They also don't follow the rules mentioned before for superlative adjective. If, for example, you have the adjective of good, alright, if you say that was the goodest birthday present ever to show superlative adjective, it is wrong. The correct one is the superlative adjective for good is best. So you say that was the best birthday present ever, right? The same for this case. If you say, I bought the littlest expensive souvenir that I could find. So this is wrong, right? If you say the correct one is, I bought the least expensive souvenir that I could find, right? So you know that the superlative adjective for little is least. You cannot say littlest by adding est. This is totally wrong. Right, so before we wrap up, so this is the summary chart of the irregular comparative adjective and irregular superlative adjective. Right, so you need to study the table here in order to know that how the adjective change. Right, next is the end of the slides where I put again, right, the tables of adjective, comparative, and superlative, so that you know it will be easier for you to look at this table and know the rules on how to form the comparative adjective, and also the rules on how to form superlative adjective based on the number of the syllables. Right, so before we end, this is the task for this week. What you can do is you can go to your eCampus. Right after you watch this video, you can go and download the PowerPoint slides note, and then later you can do the exercise 1 on comparative adjective. You have exercise 2, exercise 3, and exercise 4. Right, so that's all for today. I hope you can understand the lesson for today. Thank you. See you again. Bye.